and welcome to the third in my series of 4 top tips for writing EAP resources for other teachers. In this video, I'm going to look at the concept of materials that teach off the page. As busy teachers, we don't want to be asked to teach with materials that take us forever to understand what's going on. There's nothing worse than looking at a page of materials and not being able to figure out how it's going to work in the classroom. Materials that teach off the page are nice and clear, so as soon as the teacher looks at them, they can read through, they can understand what the aims of the materials are, they can see what's going on and how they're going to implement that in the classroom. In other words, it's about creating materials that are a joy for your colleagues to use. So what are some of the key elements in making beautiful teach off the page materials? Well, I'm going to start with the idea of page layout and images. I think often in EAP, because we have the idea that the materials that students are eventually going to be exposed to as part of their studies are often quite dense, lots of black and white text on a page, then our classroom materials should be similar. But I think in fact the opposite is true. Part of the job of an EAP teacher is to make academic language more approachable, to present it to students in a way that's scaffolded, that's broken down and allows them to get a foothold and to see how they can go about making sense of this kind of language. And I think the way materials are presented on the page, the use of images, headings, if possible colour, can really help in that process. We also need nice, clear, consistent rubrics, so both the teacher and the students understand what they should be doing. You need clear steps and staging, so that the progress through the lesson is nice and clear to everyone. I also think you need to minimise the components as much as you can. I'm not saying that you shouldn't include audio or video where it's relevant, but the last thing a teacher who's getting ready for a lesson wants is to have to run around and find copies of the student handouts in one place, the teacher's notes are somewhere else, there's an audio script that's saved on a shared drive, there's a video that's been posted on the online learning system, and it takes them forever to just get together what they need. Think about the practicalities of making a teacher's life as simple as possible and putting together everything you can in one place. Now that might include teacher's notes if relevant, but this isn't an opportunity for you to write a whole essay about how you think this lesson should be taught. Keep them as simple as possible so that at a glance the teacher can see the key things, perhaps the procedure bullet pointed or numbered through the lesson. If there's any extra information that you want to give, a definition or something like that, maybe put it in a box so it stands out nice and clearly. And also make sure you include answer keys. Don't assume that the teacher is going to be able to come up with all the answers to all the activities off the top of their head. All of us have sudden brain fade in the middle of a lesson, so you want a nice clear answer key that you can refer to. One way of achieving this clarity is to create a style sheet as you're writing materials. Now this is something that happens a lot in the publishing process and is usually done by an editor who makes, if you like, a list of the things that are going to be used throughout the materials. So what terminology is going to be used to make sure it's consistent? What spelling rules? So are you going to use ISE or IZE spellings, for example? How is the numbering going to work? What kind of headings are you going to have? Make sure the wording for rubrics is the same. If a teacher comes across different wordings for what's apparently the same activity, then they're going to be confused. Well, is this asking me to do the same as before, or is it actually something different? So being consistent with the wording of your rubrics. Think about things like, how are you going to credit sources? If you're using extracts from authentic published materials, how are you going to show where those materials come from? How are you going to use bolding and italics? This is useful just if you're writing yourself to ensure that you're consistent across different lessons, but it really comes into its own if you've got several people working together on materials to make sure that everybody is singing off the same style sheet. Now, up until now, I've been talking about clarity and consistency, which I think are really important. But it's also important to bear in mind that experienced EAP teachers bring a lot of their own ideas to the classroom. So you need to think about an element of flexibility in the materials too. Teachers quite legitimately will want to adapt the materials either to their own teaching style or to better suit the particular students they have in the class. They might want to skip over things that they feel that their students are already good at and maybe spend more time or supplement activities where their students are struggling. One way of doing that is to add an element of modularity into the materials, by which I mean that not every activity should depend on every other activity. There's nothing worse than getting to exercise 5 and it says, look back at your answers for exercise 3, and you realise you skipped exercise 3 and the whole thing suddenly falls to pieces. Of course, some activities will be dependent on others, but think about, is it possible to make elements stand alone so that teachers can mix and match a little bit? Next up, in my final video, I'm going to be talking about the importance of getting feedback on materials you've written and ways of dealing with that feedback. See you next time.